I want to welcome you to Beatles-A-Rama TV.
Hello, everybody. James D. Jones here of the Magical Mystery Tour, the Beatle Years and Beyond for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And today, is one of those interviews that you didn't know you needed to hear, but you're going to be blown away about it. This is such a great story with this interview. The person I'm going to interview today is Tom Murray. He is a photographer whose lens has brushed against history. Best known for his iconic Mad Day Out images with the Beatles in July of 1968. Murray was barely in his 20s when he found himself capturing what would become the band's last carefree afternoon together. With fewer than 40 frames of color film, he produced a body of work that has endured for more than 5 decades. The photographs, they still feel as live and mischievous and also human as the day that they were taken. Now, Murray also, his career extends way beyond that one singular afternoon, with a background spanning in commercial, portrait, and fashion photography. He has worked with a wide array of clients and subjects, always bringing his images a sensitivity to detail and an instinct for storytelling. His philosophy is simple, folks. A great photograph does not freeze a moment. Rather, it transcends all of time, carrying with it the emotions and the fragments of humanity just beneath the surface. Now, today, we're going to be talking with Tom Murray as he reflects on his time not only with John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but also on his journey of being an artist defined by a legendary moment while continuing to evolve as a creative force in his own right. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Tom Murray. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. Well, thank you for that build-up. I think I should now hire you as my public relations consultant. I'm looking around thinking, who's he talking about? Can't be me.
Well, I will say this, Tom, your story is just an amazing story, plain and simple. It's just an amazing story. So let's start off before we get any further. Who was Tom Murray before you decided to become a photographer?
Tom Murray was someone who was learning to motor race a racetrack in Britain before I was actually allowed to drive on the road. And I also wanted to be an actor, but I'm very bad at remembering names, never mind lines. And I couldn't race fast enough, and I ran out of money. And I couldn't remember lines, so I stopped being an actor. And I thought I'd be a photographer. And I was very lucky. I'm actually in the middle of writing my autobiography, so I know about the first 25 years. I can remember most of that. I might stumble a little later on. I started working in a local newspaper, and I worked in local newspapers for 4.5 years. And then just by accident, someone mentioned, would I like to work abroad? And I said, sure. And I got a call to go to London, be interviewed. And one dark and stormy night, I found myself in what was Northern Rhodesia, working in Africa. My mother threw a hissy fit when I said I was working away from home. She thought London. I said, no, a bit further away. She said, where, Paris? I said, no, Africa. My mother said, you'll get eaten by lions and tigers. I said, no, mother, there are no tigers in Africa. They're in India. She said, you'll get chased by elephants. Boy, was she right. That happened twice. Fortunately, I was in a car. I couldn't get out of the way.
Man, oh man. So how old were you when you started doing photography?
I was 16. And when I went to Africa when I was 20 and a half. I had my 21st birthday at the end of the print shift. We put the paper to bed and they took me to a nightclub, which happened to be a strip club of very glamorous young ladies. It was the only place that was open when we closed the newspaper at 12:30 at night. And the next night they took me to the main hotel in Kitwe, of what is now the Republic of Zambia, and they stupidly told everyone it was my birthday. So the whole place was singing happy birthday, and I was trying to disappear under the table. I was so embarrassed. But I then spent 4.5 years in Africa, and I only left on a whim. I wanted to go back and see my parents because originally I was only going to be in Africa for 2 years. And at 4.5 years, I asked, could I please have an extra 2 weeks holiday without pay? I wanted to go home on an ocean liner. And they said no. So I told them where to shove their job, as one does politely. And that was me. That was me leaving South Africa because I moved all the way down, went to Zambia, into Zimbabwe, then down, and I worked in Botswana, Swaziland, Lorenzo Marks. And I just saw Africa's most amazing place I've ever lived in. And when I was leaving, one of the directors, Victor Melanie, said, I'm sorry you're leaving. You remind me of Lord Snowden. I said, why? He said, you're young, opinionated, arrogant, and a very good photographer. I thought, well, one or two out of that little group was fine. So I got on the ship, went home, and had a great time. And was one of the other passengers was Lord Boothby, which historians might remember. He was allied to the Cray twins, who were people that shot people. They were gangsters in London at the time. So it was very interesting talking to him. And when I got home, my mother said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to write to the four most famous photographers and ask, what should I do? Because that was 9 years in newspapers. I'd won 3 international press awards. I'd won a world press award. I'd won awards from my ballet photography, which took me ages to learn how to do. And she said, why don't you write to Lord Snowden like Victor Melanie said? I said, oh, he'll never answer. Well, I went out and bought an XK150 Jaguar just to keep myself pleased. It's a lovely car. I sold it to a photographer and just promptly crashed it. But I only got one answer. That was from Lord Snowden. So I cleaned myself, cleaned the car, polished the portfolio, and went off to London. And I do suffer from stage fright a lot. So I have a bravado, which I put up a screen to protect myself. Vomited twice on the way there. I now know how to control that after 60 odd years of photography. And I went to Kensington Palace, and Lord Snowden liked my work, and he said there are 2 jobs, one at Vogue, and he said the staff photographer for the Sunday Times magazine who works in the studio which he designed has resigned this morning at 10. By 1 o'clock I was at the Sunday Times. By 2 o'clock I had the job, and they said, would you start on April the 1st? I said, I'm not starting a new job on April Fool's Day. So I started April the 2nd. And we had fantastic photographers there. Ivana, a brilliant woman photographer, a lovely American lady. She worked with Marilyn Monroe and Robert Mitchum and mega stars like that. We also had Don McCullum, the world famous war photographer. And of course, I worked with Snowden. And one day, Don McCullum said he's going to photograph a pop group. Would I drive him around? And I said, well, I'd have to go home and get the car, because even in 1968, there was nowhere to park in London.
Mhm.
And I lived in Bryanston Square, which sounds very grand, but it was a house that belonged to a photographer who'd bought a full-size house, and it was 9 months on the lease. So a whole bunch of us young people lived in that house. But it was next door to Lord Montague of Bewley, but there was still nowhere to park. So I went back to my parents' house, got the Jag, went back. I don't know what happened. It
Oh.
just disappeared.
That's okay.
That's why I hate technology. That's why I still use a film camera.
Well, tell you what, let's do this. It cut off when you said you were going back home to get the Jag. Okay, so let's start from there in 3, 2, 1. So
Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, good.
Are you
Okay.
good?
Yes, it seems to be working again.
Okay.
I'll try not to breathe on the camera.
All right. Well, if you could start off from you went back home to get the Jag.
Yes, I went back. Let me know when.
In 3, 2, 1.
A quick sip of wine, as we had a technical malfunction, which was probably my fault. I went home to Suffolk to pick up my XK150, and we met at the Sunday Times studio. And as I was leaving, Don said, bring your camera, you might get some nice snaps. Now, I still have the camera. It's actually in New York, well, in a nearby New York, with all the original slides. And we drove off and we went to a rehearsal rooms. And when we went in the hallway, I said, oh, someone's playing Lady Madonna. And I opened the door and went, "Oh shit, it's Paul McCartney." I have to beep that out. NBC had to beep me out, and I was like, "ABC have beep me out." So I usually go, "Oh, it's a naughty word," but
No
and
beeping here.
there was John and Yoko, and there was George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and I went, "Is that the group?" I mean, my voice went almost falsetto, and he said, "Oh yes, didn't I say?" And I went, "No, I have one camera, one lens, and for some reason, and I'll never know why, I put 2 rolls of color film in my jacket pocket, and off we went." And we drove around London. Someone said, "Oh, didn't you get bothered by people?" I said, no one had a mobile phone in 1968. It was only people that actually saw us at that moment. We did cause a couple of accidents where kids would drive by and their parents go, shouting, "Dad, Dad, it's the Beatles." And we called 2 very small fender benders. No one was
Oh, no.
seriously hurt because no one believed it. They were the
Right.
4 Beatles with Mal and Mal's son, who I've since met, and
Hmm.
looks scary like his dad. It's quite
Oh, boy.
freaky. And we went around, and I couldn't believe I was photographing the Beatles, the 4 most famous boys in the world. And it was just fantastic.
So you're like 25 years old.
Yep.
You don't know who you're going to be photographing. And when you get there, it's the Beatles of
Yeah.
all things. And I mean, you couldn't contain your excitement.
Oh
Now,
no, that's why I said that what I did. But fortunately, then because I was working with Don, and because I'd done 9 years in newspapers, the
yeah,
professionalism clicked in. And
kicked
I
right
just
in.
really went on remote control. I mean, I had wonderful talks with George, who was a motor racing fan, and he was also a
Yes.
film fan. And we talked, and Paul and John were yakking away. They were more or less deciding where we would go. And Ringo was just such a nice, charming person. Little did I know, a year later, I'd be photographing some furniture he designed at the Sunday
Oh,
Times. And we just went all around London, and it was a June the 28th, and the weather was what you would call Kodak cloudy bright. It wasn't
ah,
sunny, but it wasn't cold. It was a typical summer. I think this is probably the best summer we've ever had in this country. But that was the lighting was perfect, and we just went round here and there. We first were supposed to go to a cemetery, Highgate Cemetery, because John wanted to be photographed at Lennon's tomb. But of course,
ah,
being Sunday in 1968, everything was closed, and the cemetery was closed.
oh my.
You can't disturb the dead on a Sunday. I mean, everything's open now. And we
Right.
ended up going outside that house in Swains Lane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Now,
years later, when I did my book, which is now at a print, sadly, we went back there and I rang the doorbell because I knew the people living in it had a copy of that photograph. And I knocked on the door and said, "Oh, hello, my name's Tom Murray." They went, "Oh my God, we've got your picture." They took me in the house, showed me the picture, and they said they get lots of tourists at the weekend. And they said they
ah,
get very strange people turning up dressed as Beatles
oh
occasionally.
my. Now, Tom, when you think back on that summer day in July of 1968, do you remember it as a Beatles shoot or simply a day spent with 4 young men caught between playfulness and history?
It was actually just something quite surreal. It only dawned on me later when I got home, because I had to take the car back to my parents, drop John off and that. And when I got home, my mother said, "Well, what did you do? Who did you photograph?" And as I went out and closed, I said, "The Beatles." And I heard a lot of screaming and yelling. And my mother said, "What was it like?" And I said, "It was a mad day out." I said, "We spent all day photographing the Beatles all over London." And she said, "What was it like?" I said, "I'm still not quite sure it's real." And then that's how it felt. And when I went back on the Monday, put the 2 rolls of film into the lab, got them back, and Beatles fans hate me. I threw away the ones I didn't like.
Hmm,
I
I've
didn't
heard
shoot
that
all of the
story.
2 rolls. Yeah. Well, there's still 2 pictures that I took I don't like, but I've never told anyone which 2 they are, and I never will. I'm not even going to write it down when I'm dead or before I'm dead. But no,
Well,
I was very lucky because I'd worked in newspapers. I looked at everything as being a front cover upright or a double page spread. And
uh,
that's how I worked it. And because I was not dragging along my usual case of 4 cameras and lenses and
mhm,
film and lights and this and that, I had to
mhm,
be very restrictive in what I took. And sometimes, if you went from one location to another, you would take the film out if you were on frame 29 and put a new film in because you didn't want to be trying to change film. because you only had 36 in each one, only had one in each
Oh,
pocket, and that
yeah.
was it. So I was very good, and I ended up with, well, people say they're the best pictures of the Beatles ever in 1968. And I used to go, oh, no, no, no. And now I say, yes, they damn well are. They're fabulous pictures. And I'm really proud of them. And Paul and Ringo signed prints, and I've raised over £1.7 million for charity using those. And that's why Wednesday is a Beatles thing for prostate cancer. And being old, one must look after those areas.
Right. The life you
Luckily,
save may be your own.
luckily there's no live demonstrations tomorrow night.
Oh, good thing. Now, you had shot fewer than 40 frames, yet
Yeah.
the collection feels timeless. Do you think that, the limitation helped you capture something more intentional than just endless roll taking could?
Well, the first job I ever did when I was 15, I was given 4 plates and sent on 2 jobs. So I had 2 plates per job. And I'm being very Scottish. I'm very mean about blasting away with film. And I've always believed, one photographer, Dennis Mansell, said, one day you'll see like the camera does. And I never knew what he meant. And one day I came back and said, I see what you mean. I see exactly the image as the camera sees it. And the other photographer that did that is Don McCullum. He did a
Hmm.
show for the BBC in showing black and white prints, and every image you saw on the camera was exactly what ended up on the print. And if you look at my collection, they're cropped so tight. And I very early on learned, if I was going to have a bigger picture than the other photographers, I had to crop it so tight you couldn't shrink it. So they were getting a single column picture, and I was getting a double column or 3 columns, or I was getting a 2-page spread. And they used
Nice.
to get so cross, but that's the way. And even today, I've got all my Nikons, except the one in America. I have 4 more here, and that's
Hmm.
the way I managed to see things. Spielberg, to drop a big name, said that working with film as a cinematographer, you also had to be very frugal with your film. You had to wait for the rushes. Nowadays, of course, you can see it digitally, even if you're still using film, which she
Hmm.
thinks is great. And the one thing I never do, I don't use digital, I can't be
Hmm.
bothered, quite honestly, but I would never let anyone see it, because I've heard stories of where you're photographing a celebrity, you take a few frames, then they want to see it, then they start changing how they are positioned. And I'm sure if I'd had digital in the days of the Beatles, they would have wanted to see it. And
Hmm.
people do change it. And someone said, how do you get such great pictures of celebrities? It's quite easy. I talk them to death. And eventually they give up, and they just sit there and they give me exactly what I'm looking for. I mean, I had a marvelous picture of Giorgio Armani, who passed away recently. And I have some terrific pictures of people like Dustin Hoffman, Angelica Houston. And I always, sometimes I give a talk. I don't never say it's a lecture. And I give a health warning. I say, if you're allergic to name dropping, please leave now, because these are the people I worked with. I mean, a year later, after photographing the Beatles, I became the youngest photographer to photograph their whole family. And that was Princess Margaret and her family. And I've met Her Majesty, the late Queen, at Buckingham Palace when I was with Lord Snowdon photographing Princess Anne, who's now the Princess Royal. We went and had
Yeah.
lunch with Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother. And then I
Mhm.
met Her Majesty and the royal family at Sandringham. And being a terrific photographer, I managed to fuse all the lights and blacked out half of Sandringham Palace. And I had visions. I'm on my hands and knees trying to track down all this wiring. And there is the Queen Mother and Her Majesty. And the Queen Mother's saying, oh, Tom, I do hope you can fix it. Her Majesty just had Sandringham rewired. And I'm going, shit, I'm going to end up in the tower. And which wasn't too bad. Then I did actually black out Michael Chow's restaurant in London about a week later. So I'm very careful. Don't let me play with your electrics if I ever come to photograph. I
Now,
haven't
your
blacked out
image.
anywhere else for a while. Actually, I was doing a calendar in Santa Monica, and I had a massive studio, and we filled
Yeah.
it with smoke, and we had actors and backgrounds and everything. And I normally do 3 or 4 quick flashes to see everything's working right. And on the
Hmm.
4th flash, everything went out. And my assistant said, hang on, don't move, because there was smoke up to everyone's waist. So it was very dangerous to move. And he looked outside and he said, oh, the whole street's blacked out. He said, "I don't see any lights either way up and down Melrose Avenue."
Oh,
Fortunately,
boy.
it wasn't me. Someone had hit a pole and knocked the electrics out. I
Good
thought, "Oh
thing, right?
no." But yeah, yeah. So keep me away from electrics.
Now, Tom, your images have a spontaneity, laughter,
Yeah,
mischief, and a stillness to them.
yeah.
Do you do you ever feel like you were photographing the Beatles, or did you just see John, Paul, George, and Ringo as everyday people?
It was like photographing four chums because I was their age. Because I
Yeah.
was still only 25 even then, and I used to have trouble. People didn't take me seriously, which frequently meant I could get better pictures than other people because most of the photographers
Ah,
around me were much older. I mean, when I was 25, I looked like a child. I mean, now I look like a fat old git, but with a beard. I get work at Christmas, ho, ho, ho. Actually, I did play Santa Claus once for a charity in Beverly Hills.
oh,
And the
that's
only person that recognized me, they recognized my English accent.
right. Well, now this Mad Day Out that you had, there's so many locations scattered
Yeah.
across London. Was there any particular setting that unlocked the band's natural energy for you?
Not really, because John and Paul were the ones that were more or less the driving force of where they wanted to go. And I think
Mhm.
the boys were just so good. They were so relieved just to relax. They'd been
Yeah.
recording and recording, and they wanted. Their brief to Don McCullum was to do a set of pictures which they liked. They didn't like all the stuff we'd had before, and they just went about. And the trick that I had was not interfering with what Don was doing because he was the lead photographer, but I was watching the whole time with my little
Mhm.
camera with color in my head. And I
Ah,
love black and white photography. Black and white photography is just really, in fact, even on the wall behind me, you'll see two black and white prints from Africa. I love black and white. I don't
yeah.
know to this day, quite honestly, why I picked up two rolls of color film. Actually, I have color film right here. And I think in black and white, and if I'm thinking, and if I'm doing something, I think in color. It's very old fashioned, and it's just the way I was trained. I mean, I worked with some of the great Hollywood photographers when I was there. I met, people like Honig and Hine, and I actually met the Star Trek guy, Gene Roddenberry. I mean, I'm a
Oh,
big
yeah.
Trekkie. I'm a massive Trekkie fan. You've hit the ball on the head. But and I mean, I still have my Woodstock tapes, the
Oh,
cassettes, and a
nice.
pencil to wind them up if they
Yes,
get
of
jammed.
course.
They're jammed in the car. Then I've got the CDs. I had to buy second-hand players to play the cassettes, but
Mm.
and it got to the stage actually in the studio we had loudspeakers and a stereo system, and sometimes we'd play a bit too loud. And Lord Thompson, whose officers were on the same level, would say, "Please ask Tom to shut that bloody Beatles music down. We're trying to have a conference here."
Oh, my.
And it was great. But other photographers were Beatles mad. In fact, when the Beatles were playing on the roof of Apple, I could
Mhm.
hear them from the Sunday Times studio because we were so high up. And I kept thinking, why am I hearing Beatles music?
Oh,
What's
that's
going
too
on?
funny.
Of course, later on, we found out they were playing up on the roof.
That's too
And
funny.
they were marvelous. They were absolute. They're really, really quite brilliant. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I was in New York when John was killed. I was
Oh, boy.
with other photographers and the art director of GQ, Harry Clark. We were planning a Sagittarius birthday party with Barry
Mhm.
McKinley, who was a Sagittarius, Harry Koulianos, who was the art director of GQ. And we were all Sagittarius, and Barbara Turk, a stylist Sagittarius. And when we went out, there were people running by saying Lennon's dead. I said, Lennon's been dead since the end of the Rush. They went, John Lennon. We went, oh my goodness. We walked
Oh,
up the road and people were in tears. People were wailing and weeping. And it was just, I always thought, I talked to Eve Arnold about when she photographed Marilyn Monroe, and she
mhm.
said, what would have been? And I think with James Dean, what would have been, with John Lennon, what could have been. What
Yeah,
could have been. There was genius in that head. And I
yeah.
was on my first book going to get the foreword written by Tom Hoving, who was the head guy at Tiffany's. And Tom Hoving stood up in court for John Lennon to be allowed into the USA, even though he had a marijuana conviction, said he was a treasure of his time and a true genius. And the court
Mhm.
let him stay in New York. And he loved New York,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely loved New York. So did I. I thought it was. I think America's the most amazing. People say, "What's it like in America?" I said, "It's a can-do country. If you ask someone, can you do this? They say yes." I said, "In Britain, we'll think about it for about 10 years."
Now, Tom, did you sense any undercurrents of tension in the group that day, or did they just shine through these moments that you caught on film?
Well, some people said that there was a sort of cloud in the car a lot of the time, but I didn't see any of that. And actually, some Beatles writers, said we started somewhere else. We didn't. We couldn't have started anywhere else because I had the keys to Sunday Times, which was part of the setup. So I know we started at Sunday Times because I had the keys. Also, I always said it was George Harrison's green Mercedes Pullman driven by Mal with his son, and his son, who I met a year or two ago, agreed he was in that color car, and everyone said no, it wasn't. I do remember something. Can't remember people's names, but I remember what I did about 50 years ago, 60 years ago now. But no, it just seemed as it was very free, and Don didn't put any restraints. Don wasn't bossing them around. It was we'd go somewhere and the guys would do things. I mean, the famous pictures which some Beatles fans either love or hate of him on the ground playing dead. John threw himself on the ground, closed
Yeah.
his eyes. George picked up his glasses. That's how quick it was. Then they all stood up and laughed. I never photographed the laughing bit. And actually, on my Facebook page is a picture of me with Ringo in the foreground and me in the background, and Mal's son right in the background, taken at Pier Head. And I'd never seen it until recently.
Oh, that's cool.
I look young. I look way too young. But I
Now,
got away. I got away with a lot because people didn't take me seriously. Now I can't get
well,
away with it. They say, "Who's the fat old geezer with a white beard?"
well, Tom, speaking of how, I mean, you were very young in your
Yeah,
career, and all of a sudden you're suddenly entrusted with the most famous band in the
yeah,
world.
yeah.
What did that do to your sense of confidence as a photographer?
Nothing really, because after I had the pictures and I threw out the ones I put them in a drawer for about 15 years. I never showed them to anybody. Because to me, I said to someone, it was a gift from God. I was right place, right time. And
Yeah.
actually, in my autobiography, which when my mother dumped my dad to marry someone who she thought was more fun, that's how I came to London. That's how I ended up. Then they moved, and that's how I ended up doing newspapers. And her movement was my career. And I remember as
Oh,
a little kid in Scotland, the royal family came to Coddy, and I stole some of the flowers that were meant for their majesties to give to my mum when the police came, and they
ah,
expected a much older child. I was only 5. But then my mother said, one day you'll meet the royal family. But boy, was she right. And
yeah.
was never surprised at how things went. I mean, when I worked in Africa, the whole thing fell apart. And I thought, well, I'm here, I'll go. I went to what is now Zimbabwe, then I went down to South Africa. I worked in the government magazine Panorama, and
Mhm.
working in Panorama, I had a special pass. I could travel everywhere. I met presidents and prime ministers of South Africa, and I learned some Afrikaans. Most of it I've forgotten now. And then the
Yeah.
only reason I gave that job up was it was civil service wages, and I went to an
Mhm.
afternoon newspaper, and I hated the job. I hated it with a passion because everything you did was thrown in a dustbin. It was either too early or too late. And I got fired from there because I got angry about not getting the right equipment. I
Right.
was supposed to be photographing this massive area of Victoria with people with flash powder with a camera on a tripod, and the tripod kept falling down, and we'd had
Oh,
2 goes at it. And I said to the photographer, I need a new tripod. He said, we're not getting one. So I threw the old one down the stairs and got fired. Then I went and joined a theatre company, and I got 3 international awards and a World Press Award. And I started getting more in the Panorama magazine, and that's how I met Victor Melanie, and that's how I got home. And then just mum saying contact Snowden, and I worked at the Sunday Times for 4.5 years, did the Beatles, then Princess Margaret, and then that went on and on. And then I was doing I worked with so many great photographers and art directors, and that's some of them quite famous. And worked with some of the best photographers were Helmut Newton, Guy Baudin. Anyone into photography will know them. And I admired their work. I can't think like Helmut or Guy Baudin, who was a total genius. Apparently, he worked with Man Ray, one of the great artists of his time. And the Sunday Times staff were brilliant at the time. Some of the staff were friends with Bacon, the artist. Others were great theatre people. And also with Robert Lacey, who's written all those books about the royal family. One day I was in the country with Lord Snowdon and Princess Margaret on our own, no detectives, nothing. And Robert Lacey turned up and Tony said, "Oh, do you want to stay for dinner?" And I said, "Yeah, who's cooking?" And Robert Lacey went in the kitchen, "I'm cooking with Princess Margaret." And Robert Lacey looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I'm often here," Princess Margaret said.
That's too funny.
And all that knitting went on. And when I did my 4.5 years at the Sunday Times, I got my own studio, which I worked in for 4.5 years. And I met David Hockney, and I met the film director John Schlesinger, who won an Oscar for Midnight Cowboy. It's the only X-rated film. And through meeting John Schlesinger, the first time I came to New York, it all knits together. It's scary, but it is really quite amazing. Quite amazing. And my career doesn't exist anymore. Just doesn't exist. My whole way of working. I mean, Snowdon was pucker about lighting with hot lights. I learned a lot. The Daylight Studio had blinds over every single piece of glass. Apart from the fact it was freezing in the winter and boiling hot in the summer. But I learned through that. And all those visiting photographers, I was allowed to stay in and watch them and help them. I couldn't have had. It was like the university for the best photographers in the world. And I was there all the time. And of course, my Beatles pictures are, quite honestly, they're stunning. They're really fabulous. Some of the best probably ever. And I'm very grateful to Paul and Ringo for signing them. And that's a lot of money. It's nearly $2 million. And I've donated to charities in America and here. I tend to donate to smaller charities now, which is why I'm doing that gig on Wednesday. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's fantastic. And people don't realize the Beatles music. You listen to it now, it's apropos as it was years ago. It goes on and on. And the youngest person I met was 9 to one of my exhibitions. The oldest was a 92-year-old. Said, "Oh, I was in love with Paul." Nearly everyone was in love with Paul. But a lot of people like George. Everyone has their favourite. Everyone wanted to mother Ringo for some reason. They all felt they should take him home and bake him cookies or something. And John was a genius. 2 of them. John, that was the best kicking off ever. And since then, I've met Andrew, who did the wonderful statues, which are in Liverpool. And he wants to use my image as one. We're still faffing around trying to. It's going to be in London, so you can actually go to London, see the statue. Yeah, I've seen the maquette of it, which is lovely. We showed it in New York. And it's the ones where they're falling off the roof. And someone said, "Oh, was it staged?" I said, "No." I said, Paul was actually wearing leather shoes and he slipped. And you don't realize it was a massive drop and I could have killed a beetle. They're actually holding on to him to stop him falling off the roof. And that's why, Andrew Edwards said it's the most difficult bronze statue to make because of the motion of it. And he wanted to do the picture and didn't know it was mine. And I met him and he said, "Oh, I've wanted to have it." I said, "Well, let's go, let's do it." And it's going to be as big as the size of the ones in Liverpool. So I'm hoping to see that. I asked him, would he do a little miniature of me with a camera? He said, "No, because dogs will pee on you." It'll be at ground level.
Now, Tom, with all your experience and learning around all these other photographers, for instance, you only had 40 frames for the Mad Day Out with no second chances.
Yeah.
How did you know when to lift the camera and when to let the moment breathe?
That's the thing that I'm good at. I mean, to me, there is a moment. When I was in Africa, it took me 6 months to learn ballet photography, and I went to every rehearsal. And the only way I could get it right is at the final rehearsal, I would have a whole row cleared in the theatre, and I would follow the dancers because there's a split second where they're perfectly in the air. And that was like when I see people, I used to say to my assistant, and he used to always have actors or actresses, because I never remembered his name. I used to say 353, 16, 12. They said, what's that? I said, those are the best ones, because I would know. And so someone said, you must have seen some marvelous things. I said, no, when you push the button, the mirror goes up, you don't see anything. You have to anticipate.
Yeah.
You
Hope and
never
pray.
ever see the image, unless, of course, you're using the beautiful Rolleiflex camera or the twin lens reflex cameras. I mean, we had no digital backs then. You
Mhm.
just, when you got back to the lab, you went, oh, that one's fabulous. That was good. But now people just blast away. It doesn't work like that. Same as I was a great motor racing fan, and I used to photograph. There's a split second where the car is perfect, and people
Right.
say, when you see a car going very far, do you pan and start? I said, no, you pan, click the shutter and keep panning. I said, that's when you get that beautiful blur. And it's the same.
Ah,
I like men separately from women. I always like women slightly softer. Men you can light slightly harder. I mean, you
mhm.
can light them individually. You can do what I call a really tight lighting. And some of the
Ah,
portraits I do, the lighting is so tight. When I say to people move, I'm talking about move about that much. But if
right.
you've got fashion and that, you do a wider light. But there's always a moment. I mean, it's the old Kodak thing. You're capturing a moment. It's a split second. It's an instant, and it stays. Whereas with digital, I've watched people blast away, and you
Yeah.
still miss it. You still miss it. You know, it's like if I'm photographing you by now, I would have talked so much you'd have given up. You'd have stopped trying to pose, and I would be photographing you as I see you.
Now, with that Mad Day Out,
Yeah,
you chose color film at the time
yeah,
when black and white was like dominant for like the
yeah.
music
This is it.
imagery. So
And I don't
what
know
did
why. I really don't know why, because I had my own office and darkroom
mhm.
in the Sunny Time studio, and he said, bring your camera, you might get some nice snaps. And now my lovely business manager in America, Michelle Hillman, says, you've got to stop calling them snaps. She said, they worked well. I said, well, they were snaps. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know whether Michelle's listening, or she lives in upstate New York, so she
Mm,
might hear this. But I don't know why. And that I've
mhm.
always said it was a gift from God. Why did I take color film with me? And that's why there are the most incredible color photographs. I mean,
Well,
they're just,
what do you
I
what
mean, that's the
in the
book cover.
oh yeah, yeah, love
Yeah.
it. I remember
But
that picture too.
sadly, yeah, sadly, the book's out of print. So I
Yeah.
husband the one. I've got two of the small
Ah.
size, one of the large size, and one of the Japanese edition, which was fabulous.
Oh.
I mean, I never thought I'd end up in a museum, but I'm in the Museum of Radio and Television in LA. No, I'm also in the radio. I'm in the Museum of London, which was opened by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother. So I took my mum to that. She said, she said, I never realised you were so famous. I said, no, mother, you never did.
Well, what do you think color allowed you to reveal about the Beatles that monochrome couldn't?
I think it's just the outfits they had on, because they were very good at sure. I mean, that pink suit that Paul had on, it's come
Yeah.
back in fashion. And I know people that have had, I think it's the bootleg Beatles, they do a stint where they have had those outfits copied, and the George Harrison character wears the same outfit. And I know people have had t-shirts done. And, and I don't know why Paul decided to take his shot. It wasn't that warm, and the water is not that good either. But I mean, I worked on that with Simon Weitzman. We did the book, and we went back there. It took us 2 days to do what took a day originally, because the traffic's so bad. But you know, no one realised what was going on. No one saw us. And actually, I have hollyhocks in my garden here, and the hollyhocks were up there. Now the hollyhocks have moved away from St Pancras Old Street. It's really strange, but all the other buildings are still there. But
Hmm.
where John decided to lie down and die, that's a private area now, and we had to get special permission to go there after, when we decided to do the book. But
Huh.
it's the locations are just stunning, which is one of the reasons that Andrew Edwards wants to put the statue in London, where you could see that, then go to the different locations
Yeah.
rather than put it in Liverpool. And Liverpool, I mean, I don't know if people have not been to Liverpool. It's an amazing city. It's a bit like an American city. It's a can-do city. It's
Hmm.
fun. It's almost as bad as Glasgow. It's difficult to understand people. And I'm a Scotsman. I'm a Scot. I was born in St Andrews, and I can't stand golf. And I have difficulty getting into tune with Glasgow people. But every time I've been to Liverpool, it is fabulous. And there's a whole collection of my work down in the Beatles area. And it's just the people are super, super duper in Liverpool. It's well worth a look.
Now, Tom, looking back, did you realize at the time that you were making cultural history, or did that awareness only arrive like years later?
That arrived years later when the first exhibition we ever had was in 1999.
Hmm.
So you figure I did 1968 was the pictures. They sat in a
Yeah,
drawer for a long time. And I'm very fortunate because they sat in a drawer,
yeah.
they haven't faded. And I went to America last year in November, and I had to back to Houston, and I went to look at the originals. And because they've also been kept in a vault in the dark, I'm amazed how well the color is. They look absolutely fantastic. They look fantastic. That's why they
Now,
print so well.
if you had a chance to spend another afternoon with the Beatles, how would you photograph them now that they're older and wiser and apart?
Funnily enough, I'd probably go back to black and white.
Really? Haha,
I,
see?
I don't know. I know too much about them. And
Hmm.
it would be great to be in a room with them, even I actually was in New York, and I always go and visit uh, strawberry fields as just like a
Right.
thank you. And I've been there a few times, and I'm sitting looking over the lake, and there's a heron, and I hear this man say it's an egret, and the lady said, no, it's a heron. And I said, yes, it's a heron. And I looked down, and it was Yoko Ono. Thank goodness she didn't recognize me, because obviously, I mean, it's 40 odd years, but I've suddenly went, oh, it's Yoko. I mean, that's the great
Funny.
thing about being in New York. It's amazing who you see. Also
Yeah,
in LA, it's amazing. You're in the grocery store, and suddenly there's a major film star shopping because they shop. They're
yeah,
normal people.
yeah.
But I think the thing with the Beatles, they oozed talent, and the timing was right. The clothing was right. I mean, there's a picture in the book of me and my Ferrari, and the trousers that I'm wearing are so tight, I wouldn't dare try and move. I could just about get in the car. And I had platform shoes that I had to take off to drive the car. And
Oh my.
everyone had money in the 60s. And the young people started going out, wearing what they wanted, doing what they want. And you could go down the King's Road and you would watch the Beatles on one side of the King's Road and the Rolling Stones on the other. And it was
That's
quite
funny.
quite amazing. I mean, London was really so buzzy, and it was all happening, and there were so many clubs and disco and coffee shops. And I was having some health problems. Someone said, did you ever smoke? And I said, no, I've never smoked. I said, but don't forget, everywhere I went was smoke. I said, you
Yeah.
went in a club. People said if you were in the Cavern Club and you were more than 5 rows back, you couldn't see the stage anyway because of all the smoke.
Now,
But
you've often
they
said,
were wonderful times, and I think there were easier times. I think
yeah,
things were easier. You still respected adults. You respected the police. You respected authority. I mean,
right,
I'm old enough. I used to stand up when women came into the room. You always
right,
offered a lady the seat.
yes,
And you open doors for people. Now you daren't open the door because I think you're going to mug them on the way out. It's all changed. To be blunt, I'm very glad I'm the age I am, and I won't be around too
yeah,
much longer. I see a lot of what made everything so great in the 60s, and the film industry was changing, TV was changing. I mean, I remember the first TV set, you had to switch it on, let it warm up.
right, right.
And if it
Now,
didn't want, you had to look in the back, see which valve wasn't, and you tapped it with a pencil.
now, speaking of time, Tom,
Yes.
you've often said that a great photograph transcends time.
Yeah.
Do you think a camera captures more of the subject or of the photographer behind the lens?
I always say to people, the lens is a lump of glass in the way. And one of the tricks I have is I ask people to look at me, not at the lens, because there's a shift in focus. The lens is X number of inches in front of me. So sometimes I'll
Mhm.
pop my hand and say, look at me in the eye. And that's an old trick. And the same with lighting. You can make people look good or bad with lighting, but people don't bother with lighting anymore because of digital. But I'm so glad I learned all about that. You learn about lighting, what it does, and I mean the great Hollywood photographers. You would have Betty Davis at your beck and call for 3 days with hair and makeup and wardrobe and stuff. I mean, some of the pictures of people like Tyrone Power and Errol Flynn, they were amazing photographs because you had several days with them. I won't say it is, but one certain celebrity wanted me to photograph him, and I said, okay, what time? He said, oh, blah, blah, blah. I said, I need about an hour and a half. Oh, you got 10 minutes? I said, no, not going to do it. Not 10 minutes. But then when I was in New York, I was asked, would I photograph a wedding? And I said, I don't like photographing weddings because it's a one-shot deal when you've got film and it's too stressful. And I said, why? They said, well, the person wants you to do it. They've seen your work. And I said, well, who is it? Can't tell you. And this went on for weeks. And in the end, cut the story short, in the end, they said, he's willing to pay you X number of thousands a day. So I said, all right, I'll do it. Then I found out it was in Connecticut, and the people whose studio I used had a house in Connecticut. So I drove up there and could stay with them. And I went to this house, knocked on the door, and opening the door was Dustin Hoffman. It was his wife. I went, oh. Said, oh, I'm so pleased you're doing it. And it was a 3-day event. And in those days, when I wasn't so fat and old, I could run. And I was running with Dustin and a couple of the guests up the road. And I saw cars going by. And I knew one of them had the New York Times going there. And they're all looking for Dustin Hoffman because they knew his wedding was that weekend. And I waved. I waved. And I pointed my finger forward. They didn't realize it. So when I got back to New York on Monday, I phoned him up and said, yeah, what were you waving at? I said, I was running with Dustin Hoffman. Didn't you notice? He said, oh, God, we were driving around everywhere trying to get exclusive. He said, what were you doing there? I said, I was photographing Dustin's wedding. The pictures are lovely. See, now, that again, to be honest, is timing. That's one of the great things. Right place, right time, and being able to do the job.
A little destiny and fate, if you will.
Yeah, and a lot of it is literally is right place, right time. I mean, even the 4.5 years at the first newspapers, then 4.5 years after, 4.5 years at the Sunday Times, then going to New York, and then we had a fire in the studio in London, so I went to New York for a bit longer, and then John Schlesinger introduced me to someone in New York, and I thought, right, I'll go. I sold my Ferrari, which I loved. And I flew to New York with the money from the Ferrari shoved down my cowboy boots because you weren't allowed to take a lot of money out of the country. I had to keep going in the bathroom, take my boots off. My feet were so hot. Well, I lived on the money for a year, and it was just great fun. And I was met at the airport with a limo with Michael Childers, the famous Hollywood glamour photographer, and another friend. And we went to a hotel down into the basement, and it was a bathhouse. And there was Barry Manilow playing the piano in the middle of singing. And I went, what is this? I've never seen anything like it. And it was just, I just thought, wow, this is really New York. It's so alive and buzzing. And I loved it there. Too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. But it was the most amazing city. And of course, I only lived 2 blocks away from Studio 54, which was phenomenal. Absolutely. It was Sodom and Gomorrah every Friday and Saturday night. I just loved it. And then I went to in Los Angeles. People used to say, do you live in America? I said, no, I live in New York and LA, and I fly over the big bit in the middle. But I have been to the big bit in the middle, and I sometimes think Americans don't realize what a phenomenal country they have. I mean, Montana, big sky country. You drive there, and it's just full of sky. Florida is just so beautiful. And I love Death Valley. I'm not supposed to like Death Valley because it's so hot. I loved it. I took my mother there. I took my mother to a screening show at 20th Century Fox, and the guy said, anyone here from overseas? And my mother put her hand up, said, where are you from? And my mother said, I'm here from England. She said, and I'm here with my son. She said, where are you taking your mother? I said, I'm taking her to Death Valley. I said, well, that sounds fun. Now, it's just all of these things. Great times I've had.
When the world remembers you, do you hope they see you as the man who photographed the Beatles or as the artist that captured fleeting truths across a lifetime?
I think they will probably remember the Beatles photography because it's one of the nicest shoots that I've ever done. I mean, I know in here they will remember the fact I was the youngest photographer of the royal family, and I was the only one. I was called a commoner, which I am, because I wasn't knighted, and there was
Right,
Lord this, Lord that, and all the rest of it. And I
right.
jumped the queue. There were people that should have done it, and I'm always very grateful. I'm grateful that I didn't know I was feeding off the Beatles. Otherwise, I'd have filled the car with equipment. And I'm a great believer in right place, right time, and you grab that nettle straight away. And anybody, if don't say if I had, try it. Just try it. If you fail, get up. Try it again. Try it again. And if you're doing digital, please stop blasting away. I spoke to one person who'd photographed a wedding. They'd done 7,000 images. I thought, I'd
Oh,
photograph a wedding. They'd do 360. And they cut that straight away in half.
mm-mm-mm.
Just get the picture right. Get it right. Get it in the camera.
Now, photography at its heart, Tom, is
Yeah.
about trust.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself and about the human connection by being trusted by those four men that you captured on film that day?
But I've never, ever let out an image that I didn't like. In fact, I got told off once. I photographed Elizabeth Montgomery, who I adored, and I
Yeah.
photographed her for over 4 years. And she ordered a print. I didn't like it, so I moved it to one over. And she got the print. She said, "That's not the one I ordered." I said, "I didn't like the one you ordered. I've given you this one." She said, "It is better." I said, "I know." No, and same with my autobiography. I'm not going to say anything bad about anybody
Right.
because they were all very nice to me. And there's enough people saying bad things, and I don't
Amen.
have to. I never signed a confidentiality agreement with the royal family, ever.
Mm.
So that puts an extra strain on people like Liz Montgomery. I'd go to her house, we'd have lunch, we'd go out, went to a Christmas party.
Yeah.
It was a bond of trust, and that bond of trust actually makes it harder because you're being trusted, and you're
Right.
not a bosom friend of that. I did a couple of gigs with Liz Montgomery, one for guide dogs for the blind and that,
Mm.
and she knew that was my great fear in life, to go blind. There's not
Oh,
many
yeah.
blind photographers, and she was just absolutely amazing. I do fall in love with some of my stars. I mean, I'll name three.
Okay.
Angelica Houston, fell in love with, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Princess Margaret. Now, fat chance of either of the three of those ever falling in love with me. I was either too young, too old, or too fat.
Well, those are some pretty good names, though, to be having a crush on, to say the very
Yeah,
least.
well, I mean, I'd known Angelica since she was a model in Paris. And Eve
Ah,
Arnold got me to photograph Angelica in LA, and Angelica
mhm,
got me to photograph her dad, John Houston. And I waited
mhm.
3 years to photograph John Houston. And I was
Ah,
living in LA in John Schlesinger's house, and the phone rang, and it was this voice saying, "Hi, it's John Houston. You ready for the photographs?" And I thought, "Oh, yes, yes," immediately, boom, down the road. And he wanted to watch a match, an American football thing on television. So I moved the television and I photographed him from behind it. And I don't know to
ah.
the day, there's two images, one slightly blurry, one photo. My printer likes one and I like the other one. Was he looking at me or was he watching at the television? But it was
Who knows?
great to talk to him. I mean, he let me into a secret that when Catherine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart were going down the rapids in that boat, it was considered unsafe, and it was the first take, and they never told the two of them it was unsafe, and he could have
Oh,
drowned both the stars. I
oh.
mean, I
Now,
know I can
Tom,
tell that. I know I can tell that because he's told that before.
nice. Now,
Yeah,
Tom, you've spent your entire life freezing moments that pass way too quickly.
yeah.
Do you think photographers live more in the present or more in the past?
It's very difficult. I think photography was more revered in a way because it was more mysterious. It was chemicals and disappearing into dark rooms and doing all sorts of magic, and it was film. And as I said, with the plate cameras, you had a plate, and that was it. If you dropped it, that was it. And you never saw what you were doing until digital cameras. So you were always anticipating, you anticipated and you worked at it. And there's always just, it's like a great ballet dancer or ballerina. There is a moment when they're split second, they're perfectly still on stage. It's just a moment. They can be in the middle of a grand jeté. There is a moment where they're perfectly still. There is a moment when you capture that special something in someone's eyes. And a lot of it's in the eyes. And also, working in Africa, do ask permission before you photograph Africans, because they believe the camera is capturing a soul. So you always have to be very gentle. Don't just snap and snarl away. Ask, please and thank you will get you a lot of places.
There you
So,
go.
it got me a lot of places as well. And looking like you don't know what you're doing gets you in even more places. Thrown out some
Now,
nice places, though, but not many.
now, Tom, when you talk about the moments, the right time, the right
Well,
lighting, the right everything,
well,
how was that at Woodstock for you? Was there a lot of moments for you?
well, I saw the film and I just thought it was amazing. And I've always kept the tapes. And I think there was nothing like it. I think it frightened everybody. I mean, I went to Woodstock for Woodstock Radio,
Yeah.
and I thought I'd love to have been there. But I remember going to the Roxy Cinema in New York, and it looked like an old tart's brothel. It was all red velvet and gold, and rest of it, but it had the
Ah,
best sound system in all of America. And I went to see a rock and roll film, and that
mm,
came up on the screen. This is rock and roll. It's meant to be played loud, very loud, and the building was rocking and rolling. It was just
nice.
amazing. It's just, you have to be aware we're only here once. We are the guardians of this
Yeah.
world, and please let's leave it just a little better, just
Yeah.
a little better.
Than what we found
Everyone
it.
does that. I mean, imagine if the Queen said that during
Mhm.
that COVID crisis, and I'm so glad to have met her. I mean,
Now,
I have to be very careful. I get very emotional because it was like meeting a friend's mum.
oh
She was
yeah.
so nice, and it was just wonderful. I'm not quite sure she'd be happy with what's going on at the moment. But, hey
Yeah.
ho.
Well, Tom, we'll wrap this up. Uh, when people see your Mad Day Out photographs a
Mhm.
100 years from now,
Yeah,
what do you most want them to feel?
go and listen to the words and the music. It is phenomenal. It's apropos today as it was when they first did it all those years ago. That's quite spooky about their music. I mean, you do hear "My Sweet Lord" at weddings and other things, but when you listen to some of the words and the music and I was very lucky to meet Sir George Martin. I was at a charity event at Abbey Road Studios, and he asked to meet me, and I wanted to meet him to find out what was it like recording with it, because the recording equipment was so bulky,
Mm,
huge, not like it is today. And he said John and Paul would come and say, "Can you do this to this?" And he'd have to go and invent how to do it. They were groundbreaking. And I always think, yes, Sir George Martin was the fifth Beatle, because he would take their ideas and turn them into music that we could all hear. And his son Giles has done a wonderful job keeping up the tradition. And I don't know if we'll ever have a band like the Beatles ever again. And not to insult the Stones, because some of their music is fantastic, but Beatles
mhm.
fans are the most loyal in the world. They really are. And they should be, because that's the best group for decades. For
Yeah,
decades. I mean, I love
and
Little
here
Richard,
we
people
are.
like that. Elvis. I mean, Elvis. I think is just one of the greatest singers ever. But then you've got Jimi Hendrix, the greatest guitarist ever.
Yeah,
There's a lot. That music. We're so lucky. That music now we can get it on CDs and on this stupid phone thing and the rest of it. We don't. But people are going back to vinyl because they love that. And people
I'm a
say to me,
vinyl guy
"Oh, you like
myself.
all of that?" I say, "Yeah, I also like opera." I said, "I can't work it. I can work listening to the Beatles, but I can't work listening to opera." So I tried to sing along, and that year is gone. The voice broke many years ago. So,
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for sharing so many great stories and insights, and the fact that you were so young,
Mhm.
basically their age, the Beatles' age.
Yeah.
It was a way for you to kind of connect with them where someone else may have not been able to.
I think that's one of the things I was lucky. I was their age, and no one really thought I knew what I was doing.
Hmm.
I mean, they were probably right. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I've been very lucky, and I've been very lucky to have captured something special about the Beatles, and I've always been very proud it was me. And if people want to go and listen to their music, please do. It is absolutely amazing.
Now,
And thank
Tom,
you. I appreciate you taking the time because I mean, I'm up late, but I mean, you're busy.
well, I just wanted to say thank you once again for your time and your patience. If the listeners wanted to find out more about Tom Murray, where would be a good place to start?
I think I have a website called Tom Murray. Oh, I think it's called TomMurrayPhotos.com. I don't look myself up, but there is going to be a print that I'm donating to prostate cancer tomorrow, which is going to go up on eBay. And they can probably have a look and a link to that. It's a limited edition artist proof of the Four Boys on the Roof. But
Okay.
look after the Beatles. They are a national treasure and deserve
Yeah.
to be in the Hall of Fame. And they're actually really cool guys as well. I know it sounds old to say, but they really were cool guys. And
Yeah.
Ringo is a character. Most people don't really actually when they remastered the Beatles song, they found out because of modern equipment, Ringo sings along on all the tracks, but because of the other equipment, you never heard him. Now you can
Ah,
hear him singing along. It's amazing. I mean, technology is really quite
yeah.
amazing. But
That is
I
great.
do appreciate your time, and let's keep going. Let's keep the music going.
Absolutely. That's what we do. We keep it
Yeah,
alive and near
yeah.
and dear. Now, with that as well, Tom, if I can ever be of service to you in the future, by all means, please contact me. I'm always happy to help.
I would do, and thank you. I appreciate that. I'm always glad to spread the word about the four most famous boys in the world, called John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Thank you.
Tom, thank you so much. Have a great evening, okay?
You're welcome. Thank you. So God bless you, America.
All right.
Hello there, Beatles people. This is Warren Brown from Beatles-A-Rama.com. Could you tune into your radio station, the one you have donated to have? I hope you will support us by listening. Your donations have helped us grow, and we hope you will continue donating. I would like to thank you all for the continuing support. Remember, this is your radio station, so let us know how we are doing and what suggestions you might have to make it even better for you. With a little help from our friends, we can make this Beatles radio station the best one on the internet. Thank you all, and have a Beatleful day.
The John Lennon series is a must-have for music lovers and history buffs alike. Visit johnlennonseries.com today and immerse yourself in the life and legacy of John Lennon.
It's Fans Paradise. This is Pat Matthews of Pat Matthews Productions, and I want to welcome you to Beatles-A-Rama TV. Your favorite interviews and videos all in one place. Right here on Beatles-A-Rama TV, our YouTube channel.